So very good. So today we are in portion Naso. It is from our reading this morning. You could well establish that it's the longest Torah portion in the Torah, and so the word Naso. What does it mean? To lift up. Yes, I was actually in a hotel this week working, and as I went I saw a lift in the hotel, lift 1. And I was thinking in the UK it's called an elevator. And in the States, and what we know is it's called a lift. I don't really know why. Maybe we were raised differently. So, anyways, I don't think you caught that one, so don't worry about it. So it is all to do with, there are different subjects in this parasha. There's different subjects in that sort of seem to be not related to one another. First, as we started, from 4 verse 1, our parasha starts in verse 21. But from verse 1, it starts with the numbering of the Kohathites. We've got the 3 children of Levi, and it's the Kohathites, the Gershonites, and the Merarites. So firstly, this is the numbering of the priests in the first portion, and then it moves over into the duties of the priesthood and what they will do when the camp of Israel moves. And suddenly it's sort of the subject stops and it goes over into the adulterous bride. And when the teaching on the adulterous bride stops, next thing is the blessing, or the Nazirite vow, and then we go into the Aaronic blessing. Doesn't seem to be. Is there a thematic connection between these? What do you think? Are there? What would be a thematic connection between those? What do you think? Anything? Anything is better than nothing. So it starts with the duties of the priesthood. I'm just thinking, while I was standing here this morning, I was thinking about this. I haven't pondered on it too long, so much it's just my opinion, but the numbering of the priests is the Father gives us responsibilities and duties in our expression as we facilitate worship, as we are going along in our days, and we are worshiping Him and leading other people to Him. And I think as we do this, firstly, we must acknowledge that we have a duty. And this is what's happening in the first portion, is a person comes up and acknowledges who he is, and he is here for service. When I was, when we visited, Hannelina visited Israel back in 2019 already. It's now 3 years. Can you believe it? It's one of the big things that stood out. One word that stood out to me while we were there is the word Hineni. Hineni is that here am I. And today this is a word that fits in with the teaching of today. Because as you acknowledge that you are here and you've got a function, of course there are duties. Each one of us has duties. Things that we need to do, and to facilitate the worship and the flowing of things in the camp of Israel. And sometimes we do get distracted. We do get distracted. And this adulterous bride story is the first time that it was practiced really in the nation of Israel, or I think the only time, as far as I know, that it was practiced, is at the golden calf incident. You remember Moshe comes down from the mountain, and he's a little bit furious of what's going on in the camp. And what does he do? He takes from the water that's flowing from the rock, and he takes the gold that the calf was made of, grinds it into dust, takes that water with the dust, and it becomes judgment for Israel. 3,000 dies. And so as our duties are assigned to us, and we know we've got a responsibility and a function in the kingdom, then sometimes we miss it. But who brings us before our Father? Our husband, the one that takes us. Yeshua brings us. And you know what the goal of this whole story is, of the adulterous bride? Is that they reconcile before they get to the place of judgment. We have an opportunity, we've got a time to sort out our lives, to make the things that is not aligned with our Father's kingdom and His ways, get ourselves ready, prepare ourselves as the bride, because we know Ephesians says that Messiah is washing His bride with the words, preparing her to be without spot, wrinkle, or blemish. So we're on that way, and as we do, we set our lives apart as Nazarites, because as we were reading here today, it's all the sacrifices that is in the Torah, the four, except for one, are mentioned in the Nazarite vow. It is the shlamim, the peace offering, the meal offering, the guilt offering, and the sin offering, just not the korban olah, the burnt offering. What's that? Yes, thanksgiving comes through his life. So that's fine. So as you live your life, and you recognize that there is a problem, as you recognize you are part of the bride, but there's a problem, then you make a decision to set yourself apart completely. Nazarite vow. And blessing will flow from it. Aaronic blessing. So I think there is a connection. Good. What's that? It's a summary. Yes. So where are we at the moment? So we've in the past weeks I spoke on the realities from Pesach to Ascension Day. James spoke on the Ascension Day to Shavuot. Then we had Shavuot a week or so ago. And last week we spoke about, we didn't actually, because it was Shavuot. Last week Parashah Bamidbar was the Parashah, and so we missed a little bit. And now we're in the wilderness, Bamidbar, Numbers. So, is the camp moving? Is Israel moving in this Parashah? Are we on the move in the wilderness? Anyone are we on the move already? Or is Israel still stationary at the mountain? It's only in Numbers 10 verse 15 about, where it says, and the camp of Israel sets out. So we are still, at the moment, the Father is still teaching us what is it going to look like in the wilderness. How are we going to move forward? So, as we saw in Numbers 1, and this is the reason why the Greeks chose to call it Numbers, is because of the census, the numbering that takes place in the first couple of chapters of this book, while the Hebraic name Bamidbar means in the wilderness. So it's a little bit of a change of emphasis. But last week the census of the warriors of Israel, the tribes of Israel were done. And why were they numbered? What is the purpose of the numbering of the tribes of Israel? What would be the purpose of that? Why would they have to come forward and man by man, it's present yourself before Moshe, lift up your head. Moshe accounts who you are. He says, I am so and so. I am, let's say, Caleb, and I am from the tribe of Yehuda. And he moves forward. Maybe account, because this is the essence of it, is to account to see how many able bodies there were. But we knew how many bodies came out of Egypt already. So, okay, so what's that? Maybe so, because we acknowledge who we are now, but for the reason of knowing who we are going to into the promised land. So you are numbered and identified as a member of the tribe of Judah, say, going over into the promised land. Okay, so that was last week. This week is Naso is the census of the priests of Israel, those who facilitate worship. Kohat, Gershon, Merari, and this is what the whole story is about. So, but the procedure works like this, isn't this? And this is the way it works. What precedes that is, and Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Naso, these are the sons of, say, Kohat. It says, Naso et Rosh B'nai Kohat or Merari or Gershon. And these are very important words, because these are the words, as we read through this morning's story, we repeated four paragraphs 12 times, actually 13 times. But this was a episode, something that occurred in the life of Israel that's a marker. From this point forward, we are ready to move into the wilderness. And the word Naso, Naso is Naso. Let me just put this there. The word Naso is made out of 3 Hebrew characters, and the first one is a Nun, and a Shin, and a Aleph. Okay, so 3 characters, Naso, and it means to lift up. So what does the Hebrew character Nun stand for? It's like a seed. It's the continuation. It is the sons that continue the family. It is where we are going to. What is this Shin? It's like front teeth. It's an act of judgment. It's an act of an action, a spiritual action by the Father. But you can see that there are actually 2 words. The word heaven is made out of that. Let's write it here. It is Shin, Mem, Yod, oops, daisy, Mem Sufit. That is Shamayim, the heavens. And basically made out of 2 essential characters, the Shin, the Mem, and the final Mem. So the difference between this is the Mem is significant of the word of our Father. It says that my word is like dew and like rain. So how do we know that the word comes down? Because the letter has got an opening at the bottom, it runs out. You see? The word comes from the Father. How do we know Shin is a character that speaks of the fire of the Spirit? Because it's got flames. It's going up. So as we look at the Shin, we know that it's the continuation of the spiritual elements of our Father, which is the strong one, like an ox. So, when Naso the first time Naso happened to be in scriptures is in, where is it? It was the first time, actually, it's the first time that Cain expressed it. That's the first time that it happens. And it says, Cain says in chapter 4 of Genesis, I'm not sure, 4 verse 14 about, he says that this is too much to bear, that the fact that the Father sent him away. What was too much to bear for Cain? What was the word for bear there actually is Nasa. And what would be the significance? What happened to Cain? Firstly, the earth would be like bronze to him, so that it won't produce any fruit. And remember, he was someone that planted vegetation and whatnot, so a farmer, and he made his living from that. But the second portion of this is it says that your face will be hidden from me. I wonder if we should read it. Let's just see if we can find it, maybe. Is it verse 14? That was a good guess. It says, you are driving me from the soil today, and I will be hidden from you. That's the point. There are 2 things. I will be hidden from you, and I will wander through the earth as a fugitive, and the future who finds me will kill me, but we know the Father had a plan for that. So this was the first thing that Cain admitted. He said, the presence of the Father is around, but I am not able to look upon you. I'm not able to go to you because of my iniquity and the sin that I bear. If I approach the Shin, if I approach the fire, I will be consumed by it. This is the problem. So, what does the word Naso mean then? If we look at those 3 characters, it's the continuation of the spiritual of the Father. So as the Son approaches the fire, the presence of the Father, which is shown in fire, then the Father, he appears through the fire to the presence of the Father. This is what happens when an Israelite comes before Moses, and he says, I am John, and I am from this family. Then you don't look at, because where was Moses standing at the time? Where would he be standing? This is something that's not mentioned, but I wonder where he stood when this whole ceremony took place. Maybe at the tabernacle. What do you think? At the tabernacle. And when he announces this, the Shekhinah of the Father is there. And as you come and you speak and you say, I am Johan and I am here to present myself from this family as someone that is ready for service to the kingdom of Adonai, I look up and I see the presence of the Father through the flaming presence, the fiery presence that he has. So, the word from Naso comes from the verb nasa, and it means to elevate, to fetch, to cause to arise or to advance, to bring forward or to step up. This is what this whole story is about. Is it invites you and I, it invites Israel to elevate from our earthly existence, from the place that we came from in Egypt. We've heard the word, we've made certain decisions and adaptations in our lifestyle, but now we are at the point that you say, Hineni, here am I. Here am I. So, and the Father says, He will cause you to arise and advance. He will bring you forward and help you to step up to what is necessary to accomplish the task. So, yes, and it also means to give attention to give regard and respect to. So if you can come before the Father and He does this to you, has this happened to us in our lives as believers of the Father in Messiah? Has this happened to us? Do you think this has happened to us? Remember in the life, the easiest way, or the pictures that you always go to, is in Egypt, when Israel came out of Egypt. What was the first thing that they experienced? What caused them to leave? The death of the firstborn, or the life of the firstborn, was the night of Pesach. You remember? The night of Pesach. And the next morning they stood up and they left. So, and then they went through the Red Sea and all the rest and came to the Mount Sinai. They received the word and now they're ready to face the wild west, the life beyond in the wilderness. So we'll think about that some more. So, but I think what the word Naso really means is in air, someone, you and I, entering the ascending flames and appearing before our Father. This is what it means. It's a moment of wait. It's a weighty time to go through. And I think I don't think as we read through the words of Torah and as we read this morning, the repetition, usually when something is repeated in the word, it means that the Father is placing emphasis on this occasion. And I think quite a bit of emphasis was placed on this ceremony this morning as we went through it. So this is what I said. Cain said to our father, my punishment, my Naso, is too much to bear, too great to bear. I can't do it because you have driven me away from the ground and I'm hidden from your face, no longer able to enter your presence. So today we are standing here and we're looking at Israel and a census is taken. So if we think of the importance of it, I think we've spoken about this. This is like a watershed between where they came from and now they realize who they are. They know they're a family, they're a nation of Israel, ready to move forward in purpose. And what is the purpose? What is the purpose of Israel from this point forward? To move through the rest of the wilderness, to enter the promised land and to repopulate the promised land and to inherit the promises of the covenant of Abraham. Remember, this is where they're going. So, if this is the purpose of Israel corporate, why then this individual? Because they don't come, it's not the head of a tribe that comes alone and he stands before Moses and says, my tribe, Judah, we declare ourselves to be available for service in Israel. It's each individual, hundreds of thousands of people going through this. Why is that important, that individuals go through this? It begins at the individual. Because our hearts individually are changed and elevated before the Father, we as a group are saying this together. We are standing before you today, Father, and we are ready for service. And our little group join other groups, and so we become a nation. But it starts at the individual. If the individual isn't committed or loyal or totally on the program, ready, totally committed, then we've lost it from the beginning. So the word count only, it's true, it means to count. That's what it is. But I don't think it's the fullness of the meaning of the word for Naso. Verse 2 says, take a census of the sons of Kohat from among the children of Levi by their clans and their father's house. So it means, what do? You see how many men there are. From 3 years old and above, even to 50 years old. Why only that 20-year-old barriers? Why is that? After 50, after 50, wisdom has become your portion, and you're able to instill it into the younger generations. You see? So, anyways, we can look at everything in both ways. So Naso et Rosh means to take a census. That's what we are. So, but we do it in a pretty interesting way. It's pretty interesting the way it's been done, and so I think the reality that I want us to find this picture. You come up to the tabernacle, to the gate of the tabernacle, and you stand before the Father, and this is what's been said to you. It says, look up, see your purpose, find your purpose in the presence of the Father. Look at what He has instilled in your life and in my life. And from this day forward, things are different. Remember, we came from Pesach, 50 days of the Omer. We saw Messiah in the ascension, leaving behind us the expectation of the Spirit in our lives. The Father has given us the Word. We've been equipped for the harvest season. Today, He says, today make a decision. It's an interesting time. We find it even more interesting that in Luke 21:28 it says, when these things began to happen, look up and lift up your head, for your redemption draws near. Naso et Rosh. So it is not only a historical occurrence. This is not only looking back 3,500, 4,000 years ago and thinking, wow, these guys carried that, those guys did that. It's a message for you and I, and we need to find the kernel of truth. So, the kernel of truth is Hineni, Yeromai. And you know what? It's easy to stand up and say this before the Father, but I think it's a moment of weightiness. It's a moment that weighs, that means something. So what does it mean? It means we are called to abandon Egypt. Now we came out of Egypt, we heard the teachings of the Father. Actually, He made us a little bit afraid in the beginning when He said, don't speak to us again, speak to Moses, He'll speak to us. This is why Moses is standing here in front and saying, lift up your heads. This is why these people didn't come before the Father, and the Father personally did it to them. It's because they chose Moses. So, they are registered by name and lineage as heirs of the promised land. So it's not only for now, it is for the promised land, the things to come. And it's an identification who I am right now and my heritage, my whole heritage. Father, I bring this before you and I say, from this day forward, I am living a life for you. But you know, from this day forward, the physical reality changes as well. Because now they are moving, tribal areas are moving around in the camp, and they're deciding where to live according to the prescriptions of our Father, all to focus on the kingdom. So, I was wondering while I looked at the encampment of Israel, one of the things were, what was right in the center of the camp? The tabernacle. What was in the center of the tabernacle? The Shekhinah of the Father was manifested right in the middle of the tabernacle. So where did the tents of the Israelis, where did the tents face towards of the camp of Israel? The gates, where did the doors of the tent, the doors of the tent, did it face outwards or did it face inwards? Because it says, a little bit forward in Numbers, it says, when everyone saw Moses going into the tabernacle. They stood at the tent of at the gate of, at the doors of the tents, and they bowed down. They saw the tabernacle from the doors of the tent. So worshippers face inwards to our Father. But if you're afraid of the enemy, where do you face them? Towards. You look where the enemy can come from. They didn't worry about where the enemy can come from. They were focused on what our Father was doing. So when the enemy makes a noise, they're a little bit down the road, when Balaam and those guys are kicking up a noise, where are we to look at? Are we to look at the enemies and the schemes of the enemies and what the enemy is doing and all the noises and as we, they're not part of the enemy, but this morning when I got up early, I was hearing of our neighbor, the neighborhood, we live in an earshot away from Blanco in Heather Park. I live in Heather Park. And it was amazing. Guys shouting and screaming on the top of their voices on speakers the size of garage doors. And it's amazing. So it's, where are we faced towards? When the enemy kicks up a noise over there, what do? We face to our Father, because our life, our hope, and everything that we have is coming from Him alone. So in the center of the camp, there is a tabernacle, if you can use your imagination. And as we count through the numbers of Israel, it's interesting if we count through the numbers, if we can find them, because the camp to the north is Dan, and he bears on his banner there is a sign of an eagle. And they were 157,600 people counted. So 157,600 people came before our Father, and He did that. Yes? No. Remember, the people of Dan were counted from 20 years up, because they were soldiers. But today it is the priesthood. And the priesthood is counted, the priesthood counts from 20 to 50. So these are, 30 to 50 for 20 years. That's now my confusion. So from 30 to 50, the priests were counted, but last in Numbers 1, there's a different count for the people of Israel. So I think they spread out a little bit, maybe like that. But remember, it says that they were aligned with the priesthood at the tabernacle. So it might be that they were camped in a column like that. Might be. It's an interpretation. Maybe I'm wrong. On the other side, on the southern side, there is the camp of Reuben, the sign of man. 151,000 people, more or less the same volume than on top. You see it? So as we go through these signs, think of where we've seen it before. Where is this signs available? There is another one, the camp of Ephraim, about 108,000, much less than these guys. It's interesting that Ephraim means double portion, and they're the least. Yes. No. Remember, the priesthood is that blue lot in the middle there. Those are the blue ones in the middle there. Those are the priesthood. Gershon, Merari, and Kohat, and sons of Eleazar, the Kohanim, etc. Okay, sorry. Those are the priesthood. I didn't make that clear. But these are the other 11 tribes of Israel camping around the tabernacle. Okay, so are we clear on that? Okay. So let's not camp forward or camp along a lot longer on that subject. So, and the next one here is the camp of Judah, 186,400 people. It's an interesting image that it creates. And if you just think about the numbers, I know it's an interesting image. I wonder. So, it's also an image of the throne of Adonai. Because remember, as it says in Revelation, as our Father sits on His throne, He sits on the sea of glass, and around Him is the 24 elders. Who are the 24 elders? Remember in Revelation it says that they take off their crowns and they bow before the Father and they glorify His name. You remember? In the days of King David, because the Levites were too many and they had to find turns to serve in the temple, he created 24 slots. Name it slots, for lack of a better word. Slots for the elders. I almost had the word. It still escapes me. Anyways, so there are 24 time periods allocated for the priesthood to serve in the temple. And so the 24 elders around the throne of our Father represents the priesthood, worshipping before Him day and night, as they did here. And then the nation is assembled in myriads around the throne, as we see here. So this is an example or an image, a visual image of the throne of our Father. And we can see that there's a man, an ox, an eagle, and a lion, which is a representative of Ezekiel's throne, the chariot that came to find. So, yes. Yes, of course, that is the purpose of this. So if you look at the volume of it, it sort of forms a cross, so which speaks about, it leads us to think about our Redeemer. It leads us to think about the one that is the center of attention in terms of the high priest, that facilitating all of this worship, leading us to the presence of the Father that is sitting on the Aaron. Okay. So there's 3 sons of Levi. Let's go there. So they are named Kohat, Gershon, and Merari. Why would anyone name his children Kohat, Gershon, and Merari? What would we think? Apart from the names in Hosea, the book of Hosea, these might be the most prophetic names in Scripture. What was the names of the children of Hosea? Can you remember? The first one was Lo Ami, not my people. Second one was Lo Ruchama, no more mercy. The third one was Yisrael, scattered or sown into the nations. So it is, he had the 3 children with a prostitute. Can't remember her name now. Maybe the prostitute's name is not important. What's that? Gomer. Yes, let's go with Gomer. And then in the end, in Ephesians, we read Ephesians 2, the people that was called no more my people is coming back. And I'm showing my mercy, my grace to those people, and I'm bringing them back. So it's a restoration of the prophecy of Hosea. So what does the words Kohat, Gershon, and Merari mean? It's the sons of Levi. Kohat, well, firstly, then the purpose of Kohat was to carry all the covered furnishings of the tabernacle, the hidden things. That's what he's carrying. So Kohat is forever carrying the furnishings. What are the furnishings? It is the Aaron, it is the Ark of the Covenant and the lid of the covenant. Remember, it's 2 pieces of furnishings carried together. And there is the altar of incense, table of showbread, the menorah, the gold, the bronze laver, and the altar, the bronze altar outside. Those are the furnishings. So what happens is when the Shekhinah of our Father lifts, then the process is set in place, and this is their purpose. They carry the hidden things. But Kohat means, it is Kohat in Strong's number, it means to ally oneself with someone else. That's what it means. It also means assembly, but it assembles those that I'm allied with. Okay, so what I do is I open myself to make allegiances with those around me. And it can be positive, but it can be bad, because what happened when they came into the land of Canaan, they allied themselves with some of the Philistines and some of the other guys, and it led to chaos. So, Kohat. So what about Gershon? What does Gershon mean? Gershon comes from the word Garash, Garash. Comes from Garash, and it's spelled Gimel Reshin, and it means to drive out, to expel, to cast out, to drive away, or to divorce, to put away, to thrust away, to trouble, or to cast up. So when you name your child Gershon, know this is what it means. You know? So why would a parent call his son Gershon? This is first mentioned in Genesis 3:24, when Adam and Chava sinned and they were drove out from the garden. They were expelled. But the function was, what they did in Numbers 24:26, it says, when all of the furnishings were covered, and they moved out of the tabernacle with all of the furnishings, then these guys came in, and they took down all the drapery, and everything else was taken down, and packed away, and they move out. Okay, so the drapery, the white curtains around the tabernacle, and the outer coverings of the tabernacle, and everything else that, as you watch the tabernacle from afar, this is what you see every day. You don't see the framework, you don't see the furnishings, you see these. Okay? And if a stranger visits, like the father-in-law of Moses came to visit Israel, this is what he sees. Alright? So, that's what they carry. And then the next young man on the line is Merari. And we know that we've seen Merari before in the verb known as to make or to be bitter. Okay? Marar, so it's to be bitter. So, this is the first time I think that we see it in Scripture, is as the Egyptians made the children of Israel serve with harshness, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and brick and all kinds of work in the field. All the work which they made to do was in harshness. So Levi chose to name his 3 children these names. Do you think it was, I wonder why he would have named them these names. Do you think it was under influence of the leading of the Ruach, maybe? Or did he just not have a good day? You know? Let's just go. So, I think the names, the meaning of these names are profound, and we'll get to that. But what happens in the camp is, the first time we see it in Numbers 10, when the Shekinah lifts from the tabernacle, what's the next thing that happens? The priesthood sees something is happening. Something is changing. So they rush to the tabernacle. Well, some of them are already there. But Eleazar and those guys, they take the coverings and they cover all the furnishings. And the whole camp is in uproar. Everything is starting to happen at the same time. And so the cloud lifts, Eleazar and Itamar is covered the furnishings, the Kohat team is coming around, and they carry out the furnishings that is covered. Gershon is taking down and packing away all the curtains, and Merari is breaking down the structure and load it onto carts. In Numbers 10, we see that every tribe is denoting carts and oxen for this purpose. So it's coming out of Israel to be able to carry them, but these are the functions. So, it says in 35 of Numbers 10, it came to be whenever the ark set out, what did Moses say? Moses said, "Rise up, O Yotevavhe, and let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee before you." Next thing is, the Shekinah begins to move, and the ark, the Aaron goes in the front, and then Judah follows them, and the whole camp of Israel moves. For 3 days the first time. And then the presence stops, the cloud stops. And when it stops and Moses senses, this is where we are going to camp. What happens? Merari builds the structure. Everything in reverse. Merari builds the structure. The Gershonites hangs the drapery. The Kohat team installs the covered furnishings. Aaron and his sons uncovers the furnishings and prepare for worship. Remember, they carry the fire as well. The priest carry the fire in a container, because it's not strange fire. It is the fire that the Father has lit in the beginning. And they carry that fire. And when they are ready to engage in worship again, they bring the fire on the altar, they rekindle the fire on the altar, and the Korban Tamid, the evening and the morning sacrifices can start to roll again. All the sacrifices in between of individual Israelites that's coming to worship, and they take some of those coals and they take it into the holy place on the incense altar, and they burn the incense on the altar as a fragrance before our Father, representing our prayers. The whole process is happening again. Yes, Irena. Well, at the consecration of the tabernacle, back in Leviticus 10, when the Father initiated the sacrificial process at the consecration of the priesthood, that is when he lit the fire on the altar. And from there on forward, it was the same fire. It was not strange fire. So, what happened when the presence rested? Numbers 10 verse 36 says, and when it rested, Adonai said, or he said, return, that's Moses that spoke. He says, return, O Yotevave, to the countless thousands of Israel. There's another interpretation to this that makes it the other way around. It says, return, O Israel, countless thousands, to Adonai. But I think this one is the most relevant one, because this is when the presence stops and rests and comes down, and everything is happening again to re-establish the worship in Israel, to say this is the new place. And what happens then is all the tribes go into their designated areas and they set up camp and re-establish, and everything is back to normal. Okay. That's what happens. How long did all of this happen? How long was this in effect? 38,5 jaar. My vrou, genigtig. Jy's heldersiende nou amper. So for 38, why is this recorded in Scripture? The Father spent chapters, longer than the process explaining creation to us. What Kohat, Gershon, and Merari was doing takes more space. Why is it so important if it only lasted 38.5 years? Because remember, this is the time when they moved into the Promised Land. And then, yes, it moved, the tabernacle moved around once or twice, but then it found its place in Shiloh, and it stayed there for 369 years. And then the Canaanites destroyed it, and they took away the Ark of the Covenant. David recovered it, put it into Jerusalem. And this function of Kohat, Gershon, and Merari never functioned again. So why is it important? So, is it only for historical purposes? What do you think? Tanirina? Yes, for sure. I agree. Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you. So, if we can come to the place where the Father lifts our heads, and we can find our purpose and our essence within Him, then we are going. Okay. So, the thing is, these guys were going for 38.5 years, and then they stopped in Shiloh. So, Levi comes from the word lava, which is entwined. It's intermingled. It's like Levi is joined to everything that the Father is doing. Remember, Levi is not a tribe that has a significance on its own. Remember? Because in every tribe of Israel, there is a Levitical representative in teaching and in ministering and in facilitating worship. And the Levites is in Jerusalem facilitating the worship of the whole of Israel. Okay? So the Levitical priesthood is facilitating the worship of Israel, bringing it into the temple or the tabernacle. The high priest is representing our Father to the priesthood to the nation. And Israel serves as priests to the world. Okay. So, if we are part of the expression that our Father has for us in Israel, we are priests to the world. Okay? So, my question is just, after 38.5 years, what happened? They couldn't carry anything because it's all stationary. Levi is joined, Kohat is the one that to assemble those that he has allied himself with, and Gershon is exiled or cast away. and Merari is bitter from suffering. Can you see a picture here? It's an interesting picture. I'm not talking about that picture. So, let's just go back. Maybe you'll see it. Let's do it again. So, when does, in Israel, we are now out of the wilderness. Remember, this is after 38.5 years. We're settled in Israel. Where is the Shekhinah of the Father in the temple's existence? The first temple. On the temple. It resides in the temple. When does the presence of the Father lift from the temple and moves away? When does that happen? Under which circumstances? When there is sin for the purpose of exile. When something happens in the life of Israel, that the Father's presence cannot be there anymore. And we read it this morning. It says, when anybody has defiled himself, or you touched death, then move out of the camp of Israel for 7 days until you're clean, because you cannot defile my camp, because if you defile the camp of Israel, then I will leave. So what happens is when the cloud lifts from the temple, then the high priesthood covers the furniture. Worship in Israel stops. The covered team carries out the covered furnishings, because the Father is moving away His presence. Gershon takes the drapery, all the curtains, everything that the nation sees of what we are doing. Remember, it is all about the honor of our Father's name and what we are busy with. So if what we are busy with is defiling the presence of the Father in our camp, then the nations look on what we are doing, and they are saying, our Father couldn't even save them. Look how they're behaving. But if we are functioning in the promised land, if we are functioning in what our Father is doing, then the nations look upon what Israel is doing and say, wow, what a wonderful God you serve. We are attracted to what you are doing. Let's move in, the Gershonites. Let's come back. So what happens is when this negative process is happening, maybe, let's just think, maybe there is a period in the existence of Israel when the high priest backed up worship in Israel. When do you think this happened? When was the high priest on the earth? 2,000 years ago. Our high priest is here 2,000 years ago. Israel wouldn't accept him. So what happened? He covered the furnishings. Then those that were moving, those who were facilitating the worship in Israel, they carried out the covered furnishings. We know that this is what happened in the life of Israel. They were carried away. Worship was carried away. And we became strangers. Strangers living out scattered. Remember Hosea's words in his children? Lo ami, no more my nation. Lo ruchama, no more mercy. You will be sowed into the earth, scattered into the earth. This is the same message. Merari is breaking down the structures, loading onto carts, because of bitterness. Because of the bitterness that was sown into the hearts and to the nation of Israel, in their expression of worship and who they were, and they move out in exile. We are in the midst, up to 1948, we are in the midst of the Roman exile. Well, we are actually still in the Roman exile to a certain extent. But there's good news. Remember this, it says, whenever the ark set out and Moses moved out, it says, O Adonai, let your enemies be scattered and let those who hate you flee before you. So our Father said, He says, He is using the nations for the punishment of Israel. Can I read you a scripture quickly? I'm just thinking about this. Maybe I'll preserve the best till the last. Isaiah 6 is in my mind. Remember, at the end I must read Isaiah 6. So, the cloud of His presence rests. There comes a time of restoration. There is a time that the Father, Acts 3:21, He says, the restoration of all things. there comes a time of restoration where the reverse happens. The bitterness of Merari subsides, and he's filled with joy. And he comes back. Who comes back? The strangers are coming back. The Gershonites, those who were driven out, were exiled. So they are coming back. And then all the furnishings are being reinstalled. Everything in the worship that the Father has had from the right in the beginning are being installed in the hearts and the lives of His people. Who's the tabernacles here? Who are the tabernacles? Every one of us is a tabernacle. The Father is reinstalling the ways and the methods and the protocols of worship. And remember, Kohat has allied himself with different peoples. He's allied himself with things that were not of the Father. But we are putting down those things that we have, compromises that we have gone on. And the Father is busy. We heard purification this morning. There's a dream of the Father that's busy purifying us as silver. The purification of silver is this process. And the moment that that happens, what's the good news? The high priest and his sons uncover the furnishings. And worship, as it was meant to be right from the very beginning, can be reestablished. We are at this brink of this happening. Because as we heard this morning, and I've heard it from the AFM church, I've heard it from various churches, that they are discovering the Torah of our Father. And they are studying it, and they find their life in it. Because this process is busy happening. So, when it rests, Moses said, "Return, O Adonai, to the countless thousands of Israel." And I feel in my heart that through all the pressures and through all the rumblings of the enemy and through everything that's happening in the world, we should stay focused into the center of our camp. We should stay focused on what our Father is doing, because it is our Father's doing. Remember, He said that He is going to scatter us into the nations, scatter Israel into the nations. But in the end, He will deal with the nations and how they treated Israel. Remember Isaiah? So the beginning is, when His presence moves, He says, "Scatter your enemies, O Adonai." So as Israel was scattered into the nations, how did the nations treat Israel? Even our South African nation? Not very good. But there comes a time when judgment will start to take place in the nations. But the presence of Adonai will come to rest on an assembly, on a group of people who allies themselves, whose identity is only found in the Father. And when that happens, then all that were strangers before are coming back to become part of the household. And as the household is starting to rejoice in the presence of the Father, the bitterness of Merari is changed into joy. And when this happens, our high priest can uncover the furnishings. That is what happens after the wilderness experience. So, Numbers 4:49 says, and we've really ridden this horse. Let's just give it one last shot. Numbers 4:49 says, "According to the commandment of Adonai, they were numbered." Part of today's teaching. You recognize that word, pakad? They were numbered by the hand of Moses. Everyone according to his service, according to his burden. So, how were they numbered? They come up. They stood in the presence of the Father. Remember Ephesians says, "Above all else, stand." And it was proclaimed, today is a day where you can make a choice in your life to make a stand for the Father. So, the numbering has got different purposes. It is for service. It is to stand for service in worship. But when the enemy is confronting us, It is standing firm for the principles and the purposes of the Father, as we know it to be. So, the first time that we see that word pakad was in whose life? In Sarah's life. In Sarah's life. What happened to Sarah that was significant? The father promised a son, Isaac. And it says when the father visited again, Isaac was conceived and he was born. First mention is in Sarah's life. Second one is in Joseph's life. When Joseph says, surely the father will pakad. He mentions it twice, the nation, and bring them out of their slavery. Just one thing here, bring my bones up from Egypt and take it to the promised land. Okay? There's a third mention in Genesis 50:25, which is the one that Joseph says. Exodus 3:16, we see that the nation of Israel recognize that our Father is bringing his redemption, is visiting Israel from the testimony of Moses. And he says, they heard Adonai had visited Israel, and for the purpose of looking on their affliction, bringing them out of suffering. So, Luke 7:16 says, and there came a fear on all, and they glorified Adonai, saying, a great prophet is risen up amongst us, and that our Father has visited his people. Pakad. He has visited his people. In Acts 15:14, Simeon declared how our Father first visited the Gentiles to take them out for a people for his name. So, as we are thinking about this term, the visiting of our Father to us, remember throughout the ages he has visited us for one purpose, and that is to prepare us for permanent stay. And our hearts must be aligned, our lives must be aligned, and we must make a stand for the kingdom. In today's portion 449, it says, when you come up and you stand before the Father, it is for that purpose, to recognize that Messiah is our Redeemer, that he is our high priest, and we find our purpose in our Father. Yeah, apparently there's a burden as well. Okay, so it says, according to the commandment of Adonai, they were numbered by the hand of Moses. Everyone according to his service and according to his burden. He will be numbered, it goes on to say. So, every one of us are carrying a burden. We do. But to the glory of Adonai. In the midst of our burden and in the midst of our suffering, remember it says that we are to establish his shalom. So his shalom isn't significant if everything goes wonderful. His shalom in our lives is significant when something is happening to you that wants to upset the shalom, but you are not focusing on what's happening to you in the world or by the enemy. You remain focused on what the Father is, and because of your relationship with him, your shalom remains. That's when it's significant. Hannelie, wat jy sê? Shall I give you a mic? I don't think people can hear you. I don't think people can hear you. I'm sorry. It's the way it works.
Wat opvallend is van die burden wat hierdie mense gedra het met die trek van die kamp, is die cohorts, die wat die furnitures, die intieme goed gedra het nooit laat gaan nie. Die ander se goed is gevat en is op waans gelaai. Met ander woorde, hy het gewerk en dan het hy saam gestap. Maar hierdie ouens wat die assembly help vorm het, want dis wat sy naam beteken, het nooit laat gaan nie. Hy het daai ding op sy skouer gevat en het hom gedra, tot waar hy dit kon neersit, sodat die assembly weer by mekaar kon kom.
Yeah, to carry on your shoulder actually means to take responsibility.
Pardon?
To carry on your shoulder
Yes, to
means
carry on
to
your
take
shoulder.
responsibility.
Correct. So, in the meantime, 1 Chronicles 6 is a wonderful testimony. 1 Chronicles 6, it says, the genealogy of Levi's son, Kohat. We find him again. Levi's descendants included Gershon, Kohat, and Merari. Kohat's sons included these guys, and Amram's descendants included Aaron. It goes on to to give all of their genealogies. So in 1 Chronicles 6, what do we expect to find? It's a report back on what happened. Okay? So, you can go through the whole list. It is extensive. Verse 31 says of 1 Chronicles 6, these are the men, these guys. All of these guys, what happened? Paul Pity is verby. Okay, Merari is no more carrying. The Kohathites, the Gershonites, what did they do? These are the men to whom David handed the responsibility for music in the temple of Adonai, after the ark came to rest there. They ministered in song in front of the tent of meeting until Solomon had built the temple of Adonai in Jerusalem. They served in accordance with the order of service designated to them. So, they were never in a place where they brought the sacrifices to the altar. But they were the ones that were singing in the temple, making music to our Father's name. So, Isaiah 6, that's where we were. Okay, let me read an idea out of Isaiah 6. Isaiah 6 says, now it's actually good to read the first portion. Let's just read it because we can. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw Adonai sitting upon his throne, high and exalted. Think about the connection to today's Naso et Rosh. The train of his robe filled the temple. The seraphim stood above him. Visualize this. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he had covered his face, and with 2 he had covered his feet, and with 2 he was flying. They kept on calling to each other, Kadosh, 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 Yotevavei Tsevaot. The whole earth is full of his glory, and the foundations of the thresholds quaked at the sound of those who kept calling out, and the temple was filled with smoke. How awesome or terrible it will be, I cried, because I am ruined. I am a man with unclean lips, and I live among a people with unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of heavenly armies. Why was this his confession? I live among a people with unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King. Because Isaiah was brought as a prophet in a time when Israel lost focus on who the Father is. They turned their eyes from worshipping at the temple, looking to the nations, to the armies. And it goes on in verse 6. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, and carrying a burning coal in his hand, and he taken from the altar with tongs. Not even the seraphim, that's a burning one, could touch the holiness of what was on the altar. He touched my mouth and said, look, now that this has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away and your sins are atoned for. Then I heard the voice of Adonai as he was asking, whom will I send and who will go for us? What did he reply? Hineni. This is what he replied. Send me. So I think in our lives today, this is a word that we should repeat. Don't you think? So what did our Father tell? What did our Father tell Isaiah? He says, go, he responded, tell this people, keep on hearing but don't understand. Keep on seeing but don't perceive. Dull the mind of these people, deafen their ears and blind their eyes. By doing so, they won't see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their minds, and turn back for the purpose of turning back and making teshuvah. Why was this the message? This is an awful message to give to a prophet. He anoints him, his guilt is atoned for, and he says, these people cannot see, cannot hear, cannot understand. Why was this the case? Because they were being carried out. The presence of Adonai is moving out of the camp. They have disregarded who he is. They must go into exile first. Their hearts, they must get healing in their exile so that they can make teshuvah. Because in Isaiah there's good news. What is the end of his story? The end of his story is found in chapter 66. This is what Adonai says. Heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. Where is the house that you would build for me in the place of my resting? And all these things my hand has made, and so all these things came into being, declares Adonai. See, the restoration has taken place. Merari brought the frame back. Gershon has hung the drapes. Kohat is busy. Kohat has brought back the furnishings, and the high priesthood is here. Whoever slaughters an ox is just like the one who kills. Okay, let's just go on. The good news is further. Let's just read from 20, verse 20. Isaiah 66:20. They will bring all, yes, everything, all of your kindred from all the nations. Who are these that's brought? Not only Gershon. Gershon is a symbol of the whole. All the scattered ones will be brought to the holy mountain, Jerusalem, as an offering to Adonai, on horses, on chariots, and wagons, on mules. Yes, even on mules and on camels, says Adonai, just as Israel bring a grain offering in a clean vessel, which we read about this morning, to Adonai's house. Then I will also select some of them for myself as priests and Levites, says Adonai. For as the new heavens and the new earth that I am about to make will endure before me, says Adonai, so will your descendants and your name endure. And from new moon to new moon, important, new moon to new moon. We do that here, by the way, so you're invited to come. You know, it's important. And from Sabbath to Sabbath, all humanity will come to worship before me, says Adonai. And then they will go out and look upon the dead bodies of the people who rebelled against me. For their worm will not die. There's a whole message in this which you're not going into. Nor will their fire be extinguished. And they will remain the object of revulsion for humanity. What are we called to do? So in this day, when we read the message of, it must have pained Levi to call his sons Kohat, Gershon, and Merari. Because forever, if he speaks to one of them, the reality of the exile is in his heart. So, what are we called to do today? What about the numbering, Naso et Rosh? How does it work for us? Is there a reality in that for us? It's an aanmeld vir diens. So, I think what we should do is, everyone that feels in his heart that he wants to make a proclamation, to stand before the Father and say, I am here, ready for service in your kingdom as your child. I think we should stand. And this ends with the Birkat Kohanim, the Aaronic blessing. But let's just pray. Father, you see our hearts here today, and we stand in your presence. And it's just impressed upon me that as each one of these, the nation of Israel, stood before Moses, you as your representative, in this priestly blessing, you say that the priests will put my name on them, but Adonai, you will bless them. It's not the priests who bless them, it is you who are doing the blessing. So, Father, as we are standing before you today here, we are making a proclamation to say, Hineni, here I am. Father, here we are. And we, in our brokenness, in our fallibility, and the things, what we can bring of ourselves, Father, we say, help us, restore us, renew us. Help us to be fit for use in the kingdom. So that in every area of our lives and in every thing that we say and do, everywhere we walk, help us today, Father, so that we will facilitate worship, that we will be bearers of the good news of the kingdom, that we will speak with respect and gratitude of what you have done through Messiah Yeshua, and that we will respect even the fallen ones, the ones that are broken, that we find in the street. Father, that we won't, as Christian said this morning, try to be clever, but let's try to be compassionate and loving and gracious and kind, slow to anger, rich in love and in truth as you are. Thank you, Father, that you have equipped us with your word and that your Spirit is living within us. Now we are standing the week after Shavuot, and you say, are you ready for service in the kingdom? And we say, Father, together we say, Hineni. Here we are, Father, here we stand. So, Father, as we are standing here this morning, I just want to pronounce the Birkat Kohanim. And it says, Yevarechecha Yahweh v'hishmarecha, Ya'er Adonai panav alecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav alecha v'yasem lecha shalom. Father, may this day be significant in our hearts and in our lives. Father, you bless these people, Father, and guard them. Make your face to shine upon them and show your favor to us, Father, in everything that we are doing. Father, may your face be lifted up against us, upon us, so that we may experience the fullness of your peace in what we do. Father, it's only you that can bless us. Words is empty. Words doesn't carry the weight of your blessing. But we know, Father, that the blessing comes from you alone. And as we are standing here today before you, we stand before the giver of the good gifts, before the creator of the universe, before the great I am. And we thank you, Father, that you've got a purpose for each one of our lives, a purpose in the kingdom. And help us, Father, even in these purposes that you've given us, so that in 1 Chronicles, the testimony is in 1 Chronicles 6, we stand in the fallen booth of David and we can be those that are worshipping you in spirit and in truth every day. We thank you and we worship you in the precious name of your Son, Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. Amen.